We are live, and today I am talking to Romy Sommer, and hi, I am Gala Russ. We are going to introduce ourselves in a second, and I just wanted to remind you that today we're going to be talking about K-dramas and what can you learn from K-dramas if you are writing romance of any kind, love stories, romantic subplots, so many lessons that we can take from K-dramas. So I am Gala Russ. I am a book coach, a creative writing teacher. I also am a romance author. I have 9 books published at this point with my co-author under a pen name Willa Drew. You can find me as a Gala Russ author pretty much everywhere. So, Romy, welcome. Thank you for coming today. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. Right. So, as you said, I'm Romy Sommer, and my bio is a lot like yours. So, I work as a story coach and developmental editor. I'm also a romance novelist. I have 7 books published through HarperCollins London and a bunch of others that I've lost track of, novellas and other stuff. And yes, I'm so happy that we discovered this mutual passion for K dramas, and it gives us an excuse to chat about one of our favorite shows.
I know. I am fairly new to the K-drama world. I started watching them sometime in the fall, and it was because of the Demon Hunters big movie, and my kids loved it, and we watched it multiple times. And then I've heard about K-dramas a lot before, but I kind of never did anything about it. And that was the push for me to, oh, maybe I will watch something. And I feel like I also was like in a part of my kind of creative burnout where I couldn't really find joy in a lot of media that I was consuming and reading books. Like I couldn't finish anything. And I was like, I'm going to give K dramas a chance. And boy, did they deliver. How about you? How did you get into K dramas?
It was almost the same thing. There's a former chapter of RWA called CRW, Contemporary Romance Writers, and they had a virtual conference. Oh, probably 4 years ago now. And I'm doing a blank now on who the author was, but an author presented a talk on what romance writers can learn from K dramas, and I attended it and made a list of a whole bunch of them that I was going to watch. And of course, I never did watch them. It was like almost another year before I even thought about watching a K drama. And it's a little bit sad, but my aunt was busy dying of, who's also my godmother, was busy dying of cancer. And I was just sitting late at night one day, was scrolling through the channels going, nothing was appealing, much like you're just feeling a bit burnt out and like nothing. And I thought, well, Crash Landing on You, that was one of those recommended by this author. And it was, I think it might have been Adriana Herrera. Anyway, um, I just thought, well, this seems light enough and fluffy and different enough, and it'll take me out of my current situation. And well, that show, if you've seen Crash Landing on You,
I have not. It was in the last, I think, post that you were saying, "Oh, do not watch this show that I just reviewed, but watch Crash Landing." So I added it onto my TBR because I don't think it is on any of the channels that I watch K dramas through. So I'm gonna have to like jump through some hoops to find a way to watch it. But don't spoil it for me. But tell me more.
but I will just say it wrecked me emotionally. It completely pulled me to pieces and then sort of put me back together again. And it was exactly what I needed emotionally at that point. I think I cried through a whole box of tissues, but it
Oh,
was good crying. It was like a release from everything. And of course, that just got me hooked, and I rolled over from one to the next. I've now watched nearly, I think, 80. I do keep a list. Um, and
wow.
some of them I've rewatched, second and third time. So I'm still nowhere near an expert. There's so many still to get through. But yeah,
Oh my God. I didn't realize that you went that deep. Yeah, I don't know how many I've watched. I haven't kept a list. My main source is Netflix, and one of the I'm not sure if this is a point of pride or point of shame, but on Netflix, a lot of them are not allowed to be dubbed into English. So you have to watch them with subtitles. And a lot of the stuff I watch is actually while I'm doing other things, like while I'm cooking, while I'm cleaning, things like that. So watching the subtitles was not really an option. So it kind of put a lull into watching K-dramas for me. And then I went and I realized that they're dubbed in other languages. And one of them is Spanish. And I know Spanish. So now those shows that are not dubbed into English, I watch in Spanish.
You are so lucky because so many of them are in Spanish.
So many of them are Spanish.
My
So I'm
daughter's
so
dyslexic, so yeah, my daughters struggle to read the subtitles. You know, they really have to work extra hard and they have to keep stopping and to catch up. So, but my daughter's also bilingual in German, and quite a few of them, like Crash Landing on You, are available in German. So yes, I watched that one in German as well. So
yeah. So if you have trouble with subtitles, like go and look at what other languages is it dubbed in. A lot of the shows that I've watched have been dubbed into German, into Spanish, into Hindi, into, I want to even say like Portuguese. I wonder if they just have a different licensing agreement with South America or something, and that's why they allow them to dub and not into English. And also check out, for those who like are new to this, one of the other tips I noticed, the shows, at least on Netflix, that are available to you to watch through like the TV or your laptop are different from the ones that you're allowed to watch on your mobile phone. They have a different agreement. So if you're watching on your mobile phone, the catalog is actually different. Because I was watching one of the shows, like just like on TV, and then I paused it and then I went and I was going to watch it on the mobile phone and I couldn't find it. And I'm like, oh my God, did they just pull that show that I was watching? And then I went back to TV and it was still there. And then I went through this whole rabbit hole trying to figure out why is Netflix being mean to me. And apparently they just have different licensing agreements for different ones. And you can only watch them on mobile phones. So that was interesting. But let's get into our questions. This was a good introduction, hopefully, to people. And then I see people joined. So welcome again. Say hi in the comments. And if you are a K-drama watcher, go ahead and comment with your most recent K-drama watch. I am currently watching Boyfriend on Demand, which is dubbed into English.
yes.
So how about you? What are you watching right now?
Yeah, I'm actually watching a variety show at the moment called Kian's Bizarre Bed and Breakfast, which is a Korean. It has one of the BTS members in it as a. So it's just this really weird show where they built this little bit of a spoiler for the end of for episode 1, but they build a bed and breakfast on a barge, and then this YouTuber runs a bed and breakfast and has all these guests arrive, and he's got 2 celebrities. So she's a Saturday Night Live host, and then Jin from BTS are the staff working in the bed and breakfast, and it's just the most bizarre show. So yes, that's what I'm doing at the moment.
They also do that well. There are some shows that are so bizarre, and that kind of is part of the appeal too. So, okay, the first question I have for us is, why do people binge 16 episodes of K-drama but struggle to finish a book? What are your thoughts on that?
That is a very good question. So I think first up, I mean, I actually love using K dramas to teach people writing craft because they are a lot closer to novels than, for example, a long running TV show or even especially movies. You know, a movie takes an hour and a half and it's done. Um, most books, most novels are going to take anywhere from 10 to 16 hours, 18 hours to read. So they're a lot more close in structure and depth to a novel. That said, I think a lot of writers haven't yet learned some of the things that you can learn from K dramas, like cliffhangers and pacing and all of those things that make a novel a lot more gripping. So hopefully, people will now learn all of this and put it into their novels, and yeah, we'll make unput downable novels.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me is their story engine. The good shows have a great story engine. And I think when I started writing on Wattpad, which is serialized fiction. And that is also a great, great thing that I learned there is that if you have a good story engine, it can sustain a series and it will keep the readers engaged. And by story engine, I mean you want to have a compelling protagonist, a compelling thing that they want and can't reach, and high stakes, high conflict situation. I'm rewatching now with my husband Breaking Bad, and my God, that show has a great story engine. Uh, Super compelling protagonist that we are both sorry for and hating as it time goes by. And very clear things that he wants, right? He wants to provide for his family before he dies, and or he wants to live, depending on where you are at. And yeah, he gets into all sorts of higher and higher stakes as he progresses in the drug business and meets higher and higher levels of crime. So I think in K drama, um, a lot of them kind of have the same very clearly stated good ones. There are not all good, very
That's
clearly stated what is the engine. I don't know if Boyfriend on Demand is going to be a good show or not, but in the very first episode, they talk. It's very clear that there, there is this other guy who's in competition with her. She works for webtoons type of a thing where they're creating online cartoons. And there's another guy who is in the office who is kind of clearly her competitor. There is an author that one of them has to work with, and they pick her, and she has worked with that author before, and her entire life was ruined, and including her relationship with her boyfriend was ruined because of that author, and she really feels like it's going to ruin her life again. So the setup is very, very clear. You know what's going on with that character. You know why we don't want her life to fall apart even worse, and we are with her and we want to see, so how's she going to get out of the situation, how's she going to not fall apart this time around, or is she going to fall apart? So either way, either result is interesting and compelling to watch.
Absolutely. What is interesting, when you mention Wattpad, is a lot of these. I discovered that a lot of these K dramas, especially not the Netflix made ones, the short, like Boyfriend on Demand, which are usually only about 10 episodes, and they're made for Netflix, which means I think that they probably have a script up front. But a lot of them, especially the earlier ones, the shows, the script was actually being written while they were filming. So they start off with a premise, which is why they had to have a very strong premise, because they effectively sold the show on the premise. And then the writers were writing as they were going, so they could actually pivot. If audience numbers dropped on a certain episode, they could go back and go and look, why were the audience numbers dropping? What did we do in that episode? How do we get back to where we were? So that's it's got a lot of the similarities with that serialized fiction, and needing that, as you say, that strong engine, that strong premise, the strong protagonist, but then after that having the flexibility to introduce new, for example, so often when we talk story writing, and we
Mhm.
teach it in Western world, we look at Hollywood. We all look at, I use Star Wars and The Proposal and all those sort of things as examples, and they're great, but they are such a compact story with a very linear line, and they're very, structured.
Western storytelling structure, it is a signature.
And I think that's crept into novels to the point, and I hate this for us, with the advent of the internet, we've kind of all been learning from the same few masters, or at the feet of the same few masters. So all of our books are starting to maybe get a bit samey. And I think that's what K dramas have brought in, is this breath of fresh air, this
Mhm.
shift, this new way of looking at stories that maybe actually does relate back to Wattpad, and even thinking like Charles Dickens, and when he was writing. So
Yeah, so many stories were written as serialized fiction, absolutely, including Charles Dickens. But that's how people were making money in those days, right? And yes, they would start writing and they would not know how it will end, and they will absolutely watch the audience. I think that I have kind of a love and hate relationship with serialized fiction, because the love part is you can get the reactions from the audience and you can change things. The hate part is um, a lot of things that you've already written and people already know and it already happened. You kind of sort of is like, oh, if nobody knew that that was already in chapter three, I would totally go in chapter three now and change it up and like make it better. Because in my mind, a lot of times by the time I get to the end of the story, I actually come up with some better stuff, but I cannot precede it to the front. If I'm doing serialized fiction, I just have to work with the material that you have. But that was very good exercise for writing a series, because most of the time when you're writing a series, if it's not a series of interconnected standalones, but if it's like a complete trilogy, if you're querying it and stuff like that, you're not going to write the entire trilogy and then query with the entire trilogy. You're going to write book one, say that it's potential for series potential. And then if that goes well and you need to write book two and book three, you kind of have what is in book one set in stone. You cannot go back and change it.
I
So
did
it
that with my
becomes,
first books. Yeah.
yeah, it becomes part of, what is it called? Not the lore, but there is a name for it that I'm blanking out right now.
Canon.
Canon, that becomes canon and you cannot change it. Even sometimes you're like, ugh. So I think when you write series, that kind of experience also helps. But yeah, so there is like, there's both. There is the improvisation to it too that I enjoy, rather enjoy. So, but let's go to other questions. We have a lot of questions, and we are already trying to limit ourselves. So we'll see how many we get through. Um, Another general question before we get into the romance stuff was, what is something K-dramas consistently do that makes you feel pulled into the next episode?
Oh, I think the biggest one is cliffhangers. Um, I think one of my favorites is when the phone rings, as an example. I mean, A Crash Landing on You is another great one. Every single episode is a cliffhanger, a new revelation. But when the phone rings was the first time I noticed that if they ended an episode on like a softer, more intimate moment, a moment between the couple, then the next one ended on a high note. It was big drama. It would be an explosion or a fire or a car chase or something, some bit of, and so it was paced. So pacing is a big one. But I think definitely those cliffhangers, if you can just master that, getting the reader to keep turning the page at the end of every chapter, that is a huge skill.
Let's talk about what we mean by cliffhangers, because I think cliffhangers, like tropes, like a lot of other things, have a very bad rep. Like people say cliffhangers are cliche, cliffhangers are a cheap trick. And I think that when we say, at least when I say cliffhangers, what I mean is there needs to be an open question at the end of the chapter. You don't conclude the chapter like a good meal and then you like dabbed your face and like, oh, this was good. You don't want that at the end of the chapter. At the end of the chapter, you're like, okay, I dabbed my face, and then they bring out this other dome with the wonderful handle, and you're like, oh, I didn't order anything else. What is there? And that's where we cut to. That's what the end of the chapter is. So you're like, oh my god, I want to know what did they bring her? Why does she have something that she didn't order? And it doesn't always mean this kind of, oh, somebody knocked on the door, or that somebody opens the door and is like, "Hello, I'm your father," which which I think what a lot of people think about a cliche. But you need to seed something new, some kind of new information, a new decision, a new uh, something that the reader is going to be very, very interested in finding out more about. Do you have anything else to kind of? What's your cliffhanger
For
description?
me, I think yes, questions are a perfect answer, but also scene goals versus story goals. The story goal, as you said with Boyfriend on Demand, she goes in at the beginning. She's got this, she's been given this problem client that she's got to work with, and her sort of relationship has gone pear shaped, and all of this is happening in her life, and it sets up effectively a story goal of, she wants a partner that she can share, but it's not a spoken thing, but she also doesn't want the hassle that comes with a relationship, and that's why
Yes.
she signs up for Boyfriend on Demand, because, or gives it a try, because it's a way to get the companionship and everything that she's missing in her life, but without all the unnecessary, the time consuming stuff of having to be there for a partner. So that's kind of the story goal. But what I think is so important is having scene goals. You can end a scene going, so I've discovered this. I need to go to the library to research more. That's just, it might be a little goal, but it tells us that when she next shows up at the library in the next scene, we know why she's here. It helps the transition effect between scenes, firstly, which I sometimes find beginner writers, they write this happens and then this happens and then this happens without the scene goals. And it just feels like we're observing, because we're just like, oh, now she's in a library. I wonder what she's doing here. Oh, a page into the scene, we find out, okay, she's here to do research. But if you'd seeded that in the previous, so you're right, that's a beautiful word, seeding it. If you'd seeded it and given her that scene goal in the previous one, oh, she's got a question that she needs an answer to. She's going to go to the library. Then the question in our mind is she going to get the answer or isn't she? Is she going to get there and have to go somewhere else? Or is she going to get the answer and it's going to open up some other avenue in the story? And that just helps carry the reader through and make them keep wanting to turn the pages. So yes, scene goals.
I love it. I agree. I teach, do I have my giant folder somewhere? What did I do with my folders? Oh my God, I have a whole stack of folders here. Where I print out things that I either teach or that I find from other people as little printouts. And then instead of putting them on my computer and then they just go to die somewhere in the depth of one folder, actually the ones that I want to work with, I print out and then I put them into these folders. And yes, I'm killing a lot of trees. I'm so sorry, trees. But it really helps me doing a lot more references as a result. But one of the things I use is Dwight V. Swain's scene structure. I do not know if that's going to be visible or not. I do not know if you've ever seen this. This is actually from K.M. Whelan's book. And it goes in a scene, you have goal, conflict, disaster, reaction, dilemma, decision. And that decision is kind of whatever thing that is going to pull you forward, because the decision can come in very different ways, but it means that it automatically makes the reader wonder, so okay, they made this decision or they went there or they are going to meet with this person, what is going to happen next? That if you follow this scene structure, and I 100% agree, in K-dramas they do a very good job with it. And but also sometimes once in a while throwing like that cliffhanger ain't that bad, especially if you're writing genre fiction. It's
Yeah.
also fun. Just like, don't do it every chapter, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The reader's going to get very tired and feel very misled, especially if you do that whole trick of, oh, there's a knock at the door, open the door, and it's just her best friend. It's not the knife wielding, axe wielding serial
Yeah.
killer who's on the loose. You know, so if you keep misdirecting chapter after chapter, the reader will also get annoyed.
Yeah.
So yes, you want to sprinkle those big cliffhangers in very, sparsely.
It's like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. It's only nice to use is if you are going to do a payoff, like, okay, and they knocked on the door, and then there was a friend and not somebody bad. And then again, the knock on the door several hours later, and then it was like the neighbors. And then the next time the knock on the door, and she's like, oh my God, whatever. And then it is the serial killer who enters. And then it was like, oh, there's a payoff to that cliffhanger. It's just not in the next chapter. It's just set up for further along, and then the reader is going to feel the satisfaction even if they were maybe dissatisfied in the earlier reveals, which were not real reveals. So kind of if you can plot through that. Okay, let's get into our romance stuff specifically. This one is my favorite. I think. Thank you for picking those ones. So the question is, K-dramas are famous for small moments, shared meals, caretaking, quiet scenes. Why do these work?
I think the biggest thing is because it mimics real life. You don't fall in love with somebody in the big moments. I mean, yes, it's, if absolutely you've been airlifted off of a ski slope with a broken leg and, he's there holding your hand all the way through. Yes, that's a big moment. I can imagine falling in love in that moment. In fact, I have a friend who that did exactly happen to. But for most of us, the relationship is built in small moments. It's the caring, it's the getting to know one another. It's the small little frisson of chemistry that develops into something bigger. And I think that's what K-dramas mimic. And also we then buy, as the viewer or the reader, we then buy into them as a couple. Just having a couple meet in this passionate weekend, and then they meet on the Friday, and by Sunday they're declaring their love for one another and asking each other to get married. It's like yes, I'm thinking particularly like a snowbound type of story or
Yeah.
one of those. Yes, it's very impactful. We see them getting to know each other, but again, what's happening in that cabin in the snowstorm is them getting to know each other. It's those small moments. If this couple literally just met in a whirlwind and married, and we'd be like, I don't really know if this relationship's going to work because I haven't seen them as a couple. And in fact, I'm going to go a little bit off topic here, but one of the things I love about K dramas is the way they often bring the couple together in the middle of the story, sort of round about
Mhm.
episode 8 or 16 episode, and then they don't have a third act breakup, which I know a lot of book talkers and that are loathing at the moment. So there we go. This is a good way to get around that. But they spend the second half of the story now showing how these two together are working through their issues, whether it's their internal issues or their external conflicts. But we see them as a couple working through stuff. Whereas Hollywood movies, the rom-com where they do the mad dash across the airport to go and declare their love, it has its place. But do we really buy into that as we have no clue of how these two are going to operate as a couple
Mhm.
after they've had their first kiss, which is so often where the Hollywood, movies end is on that first kiss. And we're like, great, well, they're together, but what are how is this marriage actually, or this relationship actually going to work? Whereas in K dramas, we know it is. A
Yeah.
little bit of a spoiler, but I've just recently rewatched What's Wrong with Secretary Kim with my daughter, um, and the towards the end, it's an office romance, which many of us write, and they actually address in the final episodes after they are now together as a couple the issues that they face with the fact that he is the boss and she is an underling. How does that impact their relationship when they leave the office? And and I thought they did that very cleverly, showing that balance where she actually has a lot of power in their relationship. So
Mhm.
you get the sense that the power dynamic might be one way at the office, but that's not continued at home. Also, dealing with coworkers and the coworkers finding out about them and people judging her for being involved with her boss and all of this, they actually deal with that on the page, in the story. They don't leave it to imagination. Okay, well, now they've come together as a couple and you figure out how they handle these issues as a couple.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that um, each and I always think that that's the way to do it in writing as well. But I think sometimes just you don't have as much time. But each character has an arc, and then there is the romance arc in the middle. So even if there is no dark moment for the romance, there are dark moments for each individual characters. So there is still plenty of that same dark moment vibe and something that they have to overcome, but they're not doing that separately to get back together afterwards. They're doing it together as a couple to conquer whatever individual character arc issues are surfacing for them. And sometimes what is a conflict that surfaces for them together as a couple. And I think that's another way of having no third act breakup, but still having this emotional low that goes into the emotional high. I was just talking to Miranda Darrow about 24 seconds from now. I don't think I have the book with me. Oh, no, here it is. It's a YA novel, and we did a podcast episode, and that's going to come out, I think, in June. And this is a love story, and it could be qualified as a romance, but it has a happily ever after. But there's no uh, romantic breakup. They don't break up. Spoiler alert, they don't break up. And I was, as a romance writer, I was waiting, and I'm like, okay, so when are they going to break up? When are they going to break up? And they don't. There is another reason, and there is a dark moment, and there is another reason. So you still hit that Western telling structure of a dark moment, but the couple is kind of positively affected. I'm not going to spoil because if I say exactly, it's going to be a huge spoiler. What actually happens during the dark moment, but it's actually like a good thing for the couple. And depending on where you are and what kind of story you are, especially like people who are writing romantic subplots and not romance, you might not need to have a breakup. And your big dark moment in your story is actually where they come together and defeat the thing together. And they help each other. They become each other's confidants, or they become each other's, I don't know, support system, right? So you don't need to hit them with a breakup on top of everything. And I
Absolutely.
think, go
That's
ahead.
part of why K-dramas feel so healing as well. That instead of seeing this couple break up and get back together again or pull apart, you're actually seeing them working together and, as you say, supporting one another. You see that it's modeling, for example, what a good, healthy relationship should do. But it's also, very healing for you as a viewer to not be pulled apart yourself and put back together again.
Yeah, I agree. Next question. What kinds of interactions do K-dramas repeat that slowly build emotional investment? And I feel like in the first question, in the previous question, we talked about it. There are a lot of this quieter scenes of them doing things together, but what would your answer be?
Well, there are quite a few tropes that get repeated in every K drama. The falling asleep on the loved one's shoulder, um, holding hands is a big deal. Obviously, the first time holding hands, the wrist grab, before they progress to actually holding hands, there's usually the wrist grab, the first bit of sort of physical contact. And I love, yeah. I mean, the first time it happened and I was watching, it was like, oh, that's a bit odd, but you get used to it after a while. Obviously, a different cultural norm. But I love those moments that build slowly. Obviously, if you know that the 12 steps to intimacy that I think author Terry Odell has on her blog from many years ago, which I still refer to regularly.
Oh, no, no,
But,
tell me about that. I don't know that one.
it's if you Google Terry Odell, Odell, and the 12 steps of intimacy, she basically talks through it. It's a psychological, it has been sort of scientifically proven that attraction starts with, I think it's like eye to eye contact, then eye to body contact. So, looking at the person, and then it progresses to, for example, a shoulder touch or an arm touch before it gets physical and builds up to kissing and eventually, intercourse, etc. So I think that's what the K dramas do as well, is they have that slow burn build up. Um, and they show, particularly what I love is they show consideration for one another. And I think that's what helps you buy into them as a couple. One example that always comes to mind for me is in Romance is a Bonus Book, which if you haven't seen, I highly recommend it. It's set in publishing. He's an author and an editor. It's set in a publishing company. And there's this moment where she's a slightly older woman with these two slightly younger men chasing after her. So a little bit of a love triangle. And the sort of secondary male lead takes her out for a walk on a date. And he's just given her this gift of a spring onion that he made as a stuffed toy because she was holding a spring onion plant the first time they met and she actually gave it to him. So it sort of harks back to how they met. But he arrives, she's got this toy and he invites her out to go for a walk with him. And her housemate, who is in love with her, comes rushing out and gives her a coat. It's cold. You need a coat to go out walking. And that's already sweet. I mean, that's such a lovely moment. Oh, he's thought of her. He's brought her this coat. But then as she's walking away, she puts her hands in the pockets and she pulls out hand warmers. He's gone to the effort of putting hand warmers inside for her hands. To me, it's those little heart, because he was thinking of her. He was thinking ahead. How can I make her comfortable? How can I help her? So it's not just the big emotional moments that they're there for one another. It's the little moments as well. And I love that.
Yeah, I've done a talk recently at a romance conference about female gaze and writing attraction using female gaze. And one of the things that a lot of the female gaze about is about interiority. One of the other things that is about female gaze is the noticing of something. So, and it goes really well hand in hand with the caregiving trope. So it's, her coffee order. He knows what kind of food she likes, and he puts a picnic together, but it's all her favorite foods, or whatever it is, like with the hand warmers, right? Those are little tiny gestures, and it also works really great when you have enemies to lovers or any kind of rival situation where on the surface and in kind of like verbal language. They are fighting, but then he is doing, and she goes both ways. They're kind of doing this kind things for each other, but almost like not acknowledging that they're doing those things, but they're doing it, and that is what builds the relationship. That contradiction between up, so on the surface we're rivals, but then we're doing this kind things for each other. The Hating Game, I'm sure you know, by an Australian author. I am forgetting the name right now. I have it on my shelf.
Wow.
Um,
Oh, and I'm so
um,
blank as well. I love that book and the movie.
yeah, Sally Thorne.
That's it. Yes. Is
Yes,
it? Yeah.
is it Sally Thorne? I feel like something like that.
If
But
anybody's listening and knows, feel free to type it in the chat box.
and it is a movie now too. He does a lot. They do a lot of that. Why I think that book works. It's also in publishing, right? Set in publishing. But why I think that book works is because although there's all this hostility, there's so much caretaking, so much noticing goes on. And like spoiler alert, the reason why his room is a certain color at the end is like, oh my god, the best thing ever. But I think that K dramas do that well, but it's kind of also goes to me to that men written by women. Uh, I'm not sure, this is not a trope, but phenomenon. And I think that is also connected to female gaze. And again, when I say female gaze, it does not mean that you have to be a woman to write female gaze. Female gaze and male gaze are just techniques of how do you portray certain things. With male gaze, there's more exteriority to it and action orientation. And with female gaze, there's more interiority and like small detail orientation rather than big picture. And again, Jason Reynolds does a great job employing a lot of female gaze techniques in his book. And his character is a main character, but the way he approaches it, there's a lot of interiority and there's a lot of small detail noticing, like when you describe something with somebody. And I think K dramas do that also very well when you like focusing on like, you know, a mole on somebody's shoulder or like the way they hold the cup, and then that kind of like becomes a little motif, and or like I don't know the shape of their eyes or ears, or like, you know, they do a lot of those close-ups to very particular small details that kind of keep popping up, that show us without telling us that that person is falling for the other person and that they care about them, even if they outwardly might be like, no, 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 we are rivals, kind of a situation, right? Have you
Oh,
noticed that as well?
oh, yeah, that's all. I completely agree with all of that. But I'm just thinking, I really want to hear your female gaze talk. Is it available as a recording anywhere?
I'm it's I usually am using it only for like conferences or summits. There's going to be a summit, I think, in April that it's going to be presented on. I'll send you I'll send you some information. I now that I've done it and I have it recorded, I'm like, oh, I want to change some of the other things too, because I think once you do it several times, like ideas come. So maybe I will eventually re-record it and do it longer, because this one is like 45 minutes only, and I feel like there's more to it. But this is one of those things where it's an angle, right? Where
Yes.
while K dramas made me think about things, and I think you were saying that you were going to do a class or a workshop on K dramas and romance. Did you do that?
I did. I was hoping to have it finished by today, but I haven't. I'm still editing some of the videos. So it is a masterclass that's going to be 8 lessons. At this rate, it might even be, it's probably going to be 10 videos over 8 lessons. Each one, and I do have a short one on the female gaze, nowhere near as detailed as yours. It's very
Mhm.
much a quick skim
Oh,
over.
I think we need to do another Substack, female gaze and romance writing,
Oh, yeah,
right away.
we could, absolutely. So yeah, that should be out next week. So if anybody's here listening and is interested in that class, just follow me on Substack and you'll be the first to hear as soon as I launch it. But yes, it's been fun. Just talking about examples and how particularly things like structure and pacing and the emotional pacing and all of that I cover in the class.
Yeah,
And they're short videos. I've tried to keep them because I know, not everybody has time to sit down and watch an hour-long recording. So I've tried to keep them sort of 15 to 20 minutes long so that you can watch one a day and it doesn't take too much time.
Yeah, I love it. Also, I would love to watch I would love to watch that. I think that it's always nice to find a certain angle where you can relate to things. And I think one of the reasons why um, Save the Cat writes a novel was so successful, and Story Genius was so successful as books for writers is because they give you enough leverage and enough references because they put in Save the Cat writes a novel, so many examples of common movies that everybody has seen, so you can see because story structure is such it feels like such a big concept, and there's so many moving parts, especially when you're meeting it for the first time. It can feel overwhelming, and if your brain is not set up for doing the big picture things, it could feel like, oh my god, this is too much. I can't understand so many things. My brain is hurting. And they end up doing a good job giving all of the examples of all the common movies. And you can say, oh, yeah, the midpoint in this movie, in this movie, in this movie, in this movie. Oh, yeah, I understand the concept of midpoint via example. And Story Genius by Alyssa Crone does it in a different way, where she basically is. I'm not sure if you've read that book.
Mm.
Story. Yeah, she has another author who is writing a book and gives Alyssa Crone examples of her book as she is writing it using Alyssa Crone's uh, storytelling principles, or like how she creates them. So you can see in real life, oh, this is the principle. Oh, this is how this author implemented that principle in her novel. And that also, for me, like helps absorption. So I think having an angle like, oh, how can we relate to some of the K dramas that you might have seen to romance, that gives you that reference point. For my brain, at least, that works better.
And also
I
it
don't
just
know.
makes us feel better that, for all those hours spent watching K-dramas, I keep thinking, oh, I could have written a novel and a couple of novels in all the time that I've spent watching K-dramas. But if it's got a purpose and I'm studying them, well, then it's, at
Yeah.
least
Yeah.
I feel less bad
I
about all
agree.
those hours of binging.
Ah, that is another thing I tell all my students is I'm apologizing in advance, but I'm going to spoil reading and watching TV shows for you, because once you know certain things, you're just clocking them
Mm,
in the media that you consume. But we were talking before we went live that I think that everybody does it, but I don't think everybody actually does it. But because I know story structure so well, it's very hard for me to read sometimes, and I have to read in genres that are very different from what I write to stop doing that, to enjoy the story and stop dissecting it.
mhm.
Um, how does that work for you? Did you spoil story? Like, do you spoil reading for yourself too?
I do, especially reading because I work as an editor. So when I'm reading, the editor hat, it's so hard to take that hat off. And that's why when I find a book that I love and I stop caring about all of that, that's such a help. And but I have the same thing with K dramas. I'm often, because I write reviews for Substack, for my Substack, particularly for writers. I'm often taking notes on my phone while watching. But there will be the occasional K drama where I will actually forget to take notes. I think Idle Eye was one of those. I got so absorbed in the story, I forgot to take notes. And it's that same feeling with reading a novel when you can actually switch off that part of your brain and just give yourself over to the story. Um, and
Mm.
I think a lot of writers do that, after a while. But particularly if you're editing or coaching and you're constantly thinking of story and story structure, and it's so hard to switch off that part of your brain.
I 100% agree. It's kind of sad, but yeah, for me, what I found is that reading something that is in a very different genre helps, and also I found I'm really enjoying reading memoirs, because in memoirs the structure of memoir is a lot more varied. They don't all adhere to this very traditional Western three act straightforward storyline. There's so many different other ways to address how memoir is presented, and I found that I get constantly surprised, and I can't anticipate everything because they structure it so differently when done well. So I've been reading a lot of memoirs just because of that, because they are a lot more varied in structure. So that's my guilty pleasure. Okay, let's see. We are 46 minutes in. Let's try for at least one more question. Let's see how far we get. The next question I had was or also if there is a particular question that you particularly liked and you particularly want us to get to. Do you want to do that? Do you want to pick one?
Yeah, absolutely. The one about motivation, second from the bottom on the list that you sent me, I think is a very important one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do K-dramas make even questionable behavior feel believable? And how can writers do the same? Is that the one?
That's the one. And yes,
Okay.
it basically boils down to motivation.
Yes. Yes.
I think I've gotten into this year, particularly watching a lot of C dramas as well. Not the C dramas on Netflix, but the those real shorts, the ones that are made very much like a Wattpad serial. They
Oh, the
have
verticals?
Yes, the vertical dramas, and some of them
Yeah.
are really awful, but they have some really good ones. And
I
what I've
haven't
noticed
gone down that rabbit
that
hole
rabbit
yet.
hole, don't. I think you stick with the K dramas. There's so many great K dramas, but the motivation in those C dramas is often very thin. Characters just do stuff randomly, and they just and obviously because they're written over 96 like 2.5 minute episodes. Whereas the K dramas, I find the minute and I'm going to use Romance as a bonus book as an example again. There is because it's a romantic, a love story. It's very much focused. It is a romance, so there are no real villains. They're just other people who are sort of antagonistic, but they're not actual antagonists. And there is one character who is a senior executive at the publishing company, and she is very hard and cold, and she's a rather unlikable character. But eventually, you get to know her and love her, and well, maybe not love her, but you get to like her. And it's all because you start to understand why she is the way she is. You get a glimpse of her backstory. And I know that's harder to do in a novel. You're not going to have full on backstories for all your secondary and supporting characters. But I think knowing that as a writer, knowing that even your minor characters have a life, that they could be the hero or heroine of their own story, that they have a backstory and an emotional wound and all of that, that makes them feel more fleshed out. And yes, if you can, it's amazing. You can just slide a sentence in somewhere that can shift, or little things, as you said earlier with taking a sort of enemies to lovers story, that they might be saying one thing or doing one thing, and underneath it all actually doing something a little bit different that makes you question or makes you realize that there is actually a soft spot. And you can do the same thing with unlikable characters. Another example, I mean, there's been quite a few K-dramas I've watched where I haven't even liked the female lead from the start. And considering the female lead is often like the self-insert character, that's, as a female viewer, that's the one that you're sort of relating to most when you start. So yes, obviously they have the very tsundere heroes who are, those stern, aloof, like the demons. I'm just thinking, like in Crash Landing on You, he's very, cold and distant and all that in the beginning. And we accept it in the heroes, but they often do it in the heroines as well. And I'm thinking what springs to mind is Summer Strike. The heroine in the first episode was such a doormat, and I was so annoyed with her that I wasn't really relating to her. And another one was Legend of the Blue Sea. It took me a little while to warm up to the main female character. And there's been a few of them where I didn't really like the female lead, but I can promise you, by episode 3, you're hooked. And that's just because they've slowly revealed enough of the backstory to show you why they are the way they are. And I guess the proposal does that as well. Sandra Bullock's character is very unlikable in the beginning. She has these glimpses. You get these moments of humor where you're sort of laughing at her and even laughing with her. And you sense that there is a bit of a softness underneath it. And eventually, but for me, the big turning point with Sandra Bullock in the proposal is that midpoint scene where they have a bit of a midnight heart-to-heart, and she reveals about how her parents died when she was young and she's been all alone. And you then realize that hard outer shell has been protecting her from getting too close and ever experiencing that loss again. And I think for me, that's it. You can motivate absolutely anything. Your Vincenzo, I don't know if you've seen Vincenzo. That is available in English.
No, no.
Uh,
Gonna
that's a
write
it's
down all of the name you mentioned.
it's a crime drama more than a romance, but much like how you described earlier on Breaking Bad, that the way that the tension builds and the sort of the challenges get bigger and the villains that they face get bigger. That's very much Vincenzo. But he is a mafia consigliere who is, and he does very questionable things all the way through, and yet you kind of actually land up. Well, you do. I mean, he's the hero. You land up rooting for him. You want him to succeed, and in the end, you don't mind what vicious tactics he uses to get there, because, quite frankly, the villains are even worse. They deserve their comeuppance. So I think that one particularly, Vincenzo, is a great one to study to find out how to turn characters that do questionable things into likable characters,
Mhm.
and how to. There's another, for example, a very minor villain that we meet early on. He's just really a bully boy. He's sort of the hired hand for the bigger bad villains, and he's really small fry and not terribly bright. But by the midpoint of the story, he's one of the good guys. He's joined the sort of crew of the good guys, and how they do that, how they shift him slowly but surely from the villain at the start, the antagonist in the early episodes, to one of the good guys later on, I think is good, is worth watching for.
Yeah, whenever there is this reversal that is happening, that really helps with the reversal of your expectations. That is a very satisfying experience for me as a reader and as a watcher. And sometimes I'm like wondering if this is just because I don't know if there's still something about me, but like I want to believe that there is something good in everybody. So whenever even like the bad villain ends up having like good intentions and is like secretly a good person on some level inside, that gives me that satisfaction of like, yeah, like, he was doing it for the right reasons. I do not know. It's not an excuse for all of the bad things that yeah, people in the mafia shows do, though. So that's why I'm saying, like, I'm not sure what that says about me. Um, I really, really agree about the goal motivation conflict and having a full-fledged side characters. If you have a named character that is like a sidekick or even appears multiple times throughout, I really, really urge everybody to create goal motivation conflict for them. And when I teach, I usually go into like the wound, the fear, the lie, the truth, and because I am also coming from a romance world like you, a thing as a series of standalones is a very common thing. So you never know. Sometimes you plan on purpose your series and you know who the next character is, but sometimes you don't always know. And then some of those characters, or the side characters, if you have good motivation conflict, and especially in serialized fiction, when you really don't know what's going to happen in the future, but then the reader's like, oh my God, I love this side character because they're so developed, because you did think about goal motivation conflict for them, and then they become a primary character for a next book, for another book. And I think especially for people who are pantsers or like discovery writers or closer to that side of the spectrum, and who are like, I don't want to plot anything, I don't care about structure, I want to discover. I think understanding your characters and your premise, if you have those two things, that is going to have enough of a story engine to get you forward, and not to like have a saggy middle and all of those things, even if you're not friends or particularly interested in plotting and structure, because those are really big, important components. And one more thing that came to mind when you were talking is I recommend this, and I always give this example everywhere. I feel like I've said this a million times. I took a songwriting class a couple of years ago. And one of the exercises that they did that I now do and recommend everybody doing is they give you a couple of songs, then you dissect them, and then they say pick one song or the other, and then create a song that is exactly the same as that song in structure and all of the like line lengths and what's going on. So you're going to come up with your own lyrics, you're going to come up with your own music, but structurally and by line, it's going to be exact copy of the song that you pick. So you're trying to recreate and create that kind of a muscle that you practice with. So a good exercise is to take an episode, or even like with K dramas, a 16 episode series, because you said it does mimic very closely, a lot closer to a romantic novel structure, and write your own thing, but try to follow what is going on in that episode or in that series. Like, have the same number of characters, have understand like what are the beats or what are their motivations, and use the same things. And it's such a cool practice tool. Artists do it a lot, and it's very, very accepted because as an art student, a lot of times you're going to try and mimic and recreate some things that the great artists did as practice, as a practice tool. So I think this is might also be why some of the fan fiction writers end up being like big writers afterwards, because part of it is you're taking something that is already created for you. The whole world is there, the character motivation goal is there, right? And you just take that and you go and play, which again is another thing. Like, don't look down on fan fiction. It's a great playground because you don't have to be responsible for all of the elements of your story. You can take somebody else's pre-made and then kind of work on maybe like the structure and stuff like that. So anyways, I do not know why I was thinking about that as you were saying, but
It's
some more
actually
advice.
you made me think of something as well, linking it back to romance. But when you're writing, for example, in Enemies to Lovers, in fact, in pretty much in almost every romance, in the opening pages, your characters are probably looking at it, your love interests are looking at each other as, no way would I want to be in a relationship with this person. Because if you started from a premise of, oh, yes, I want to be in the relationship with this person, you've got no conflict to drive the rest of the novel. So often that love interest looks like the wrong person for them in the opening pages. And eventually they come around to being the love interest. And especially in an Enemies to Lovers or one of those. And what I love is you basically, and you do the same thing with creating a villain or an unlikable character that you want to make likable, is you start off with, because every character has strengths and flaws, and you as the writer should know what their strengths and flaws are. So you start off with, on balance, their flaws are more evident. And then slowly, as the story progresses, their strengths become more evident and the flaws fall away into the background. And again, when What's Wrong with Secretary Kim is a great example of that, because he is so arrogant and so narcissistic in episode 1 that you're kind of going, I really want her to quit her job working for him, which is the whole premise in the opening episode. You're kind of, she needs to get away from this guy. He is such bad news. And of course, by halfway through the show, you're in love with him and you're wanting them to come together as a couple. And
Yeah.
it's because they've slowly pulled back on his flaws and slowly introduced his strengths. And of course, you could do the other way around with the villain, is they might seem okay in the beginning, but on balance, as the story progresses, their flaws start to dominate over their strengths until you're at the point of, no, this person needs to be arrested and caught and whatever now.
Yeah, I love that. I never thought about it this way, but I 100% love that. And it's their flaws and also their motivations. Because I think that that's another thing. You don't know their motivations. And like what you mentioned with Sandra Bullock afterwards, we're like, oh, that's her motivation. And the same thing goes for the villain. At the beginning, they might seem nice until you start understanding their motivations. And then you're like, ooh, not so nice. So I'm trying to come up with a metaphor, but it's almost like, there is a switch in pictures. You know how those like the pictures that you look and it looks one image and then it kind of you twist it and then a slightly different image is revealed. So I'm kind of like thinking about it, and like at the beginning you're looking at this way and then they're like glimpses of something, and then you kind of like going the other way. Now you're seeing that picture and only glimpses of the other, and you end on the other side. So there is like this slow transition.
Mm.
Ooh, well, we are at an hour, believe it or not. and we have covered like a
Very
third of what we were going to talk about. So, oh my God. But I think
fun.
yeah, I think we need to come back and do either another one on K-dramas or do another one on female gaze, where we can do both. But I think that we definitely have a lot more to talk about.
Absolutely. And emotion as well. And how K dramas deal with emotion is another excellent
Yeah,
topic.
emotions, and then we also were talking about the big moments because we talked about the little moments. We didn't really talk about the big moments as well. Um, yeah. Okay. So thank you so much. Let's put this together in behind the scenes. We'll let you guys know. Please follow us here on Substack, and we'll keep you updated. I love this feature on Substack when we can pre-schedule and let everybody know that we're going to do it, but we're definitely going to do some more. If you guys are interested in anything specific romance related, like you have two people who are romance authors and romance book coaches and romance editors, we have so much to share. So send us your questions. If you have questions, comment, ask us. We would love to answer those as well. And if you've enjoyed and learned something today, if you don't mind, like typing a little aha moment, was there anything in today's conversation that you like, oh, I never thought about it, or oh, I might use it in my story? Put it in the comments. We would really appreciate hearing what stuck with you. As we close off, Romy, how about you remind us where we can find you, what you do, who you work with, all of that good stuff.
Excellent. Right. Well, my novels are on my website, which is just my name, romyzommer.com. Sommer spelled with an S, the German way. And I also have a website as a writing coach, which is writingcoach.co.za, which is the South African ending. So not .com, but .co.za. Writing coach, obviously all one word. But I think the best place is really to do, especially if you're into K dramas, best thing is to do is to follow me here on Substack. Again, just with my name. Hopefully, I come up on this and you can just click on me on my profile, because that's where I will announce my K-drama masterclass, which will hopefully be available next week if I can just finish editing those last few videos.
I am so, so excited about it. I think people will learn so much. And again, with so many good examples, and you get to watch K dramas for research, for your job. The best thing ever. Um, Thank you again for coming. I here also on Substack, I kind of am been reviving it this year after a little hiatus. I am also on Instagram. I'm everywhere at Gala Russ author, and you can follow me for more. I've decided I'm going to use Substack for my longer pieces because I had a little conflict with my newsletter provider recently where every time I'm trying to send a newsletter, it's basically telling me the deliverability is going to be low because your emails are too long and not everybody's inboxes are going to accept it. And I like, you can see today, talk long, have write long, I have long romances, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to write shorter. So I think I'm going to put more longer thought pieces and kind of like teaching pieces on Substack and more Q&A things. And then my newsletter is a little bit more about all the different resources, what's going on, type of a stuff. In my most recent Substack post, I just talked about uh, um, writing in first person versus third person versus second person and present tense versus past tense. So if that's a question that you've had for yourself, check that out. Those are some of my personal thoughts on that topic.
Yes, I love that one. And you actually referenced the book that you held up just now, didn't you?
Yeah. Yes, I did. I really love this book. I know that I'm a passionate YA reader, so I'm very skewed. But this book was so well done on so many levels. As a YA voice, structurally, the weird structure that has tense use. It's like I think I can teach like a master class on what has been done right in this book and how you can do this too, going back to your K dramas. Because I have, it doesn't happen that often where you finish the book and you're like, so well done. So well done. So yeah, that's definitely it. Okay, I'm gonna let us go. Thank you everyone again, and I will see you soon.
Indeed.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.